It was May 26 in the year 2025. There was important news this day. The leader of Germany spoke. His name is Friedrich Merz. He said something new and very important about weapons for Ukraine. Before this day, there were rules for Ukraine about using some weapons. These rules said Ukraine could only use certain weapons inside its own country. But on this day, the German leader said this rule is finished. He said Ukraine can now use these weapons more freely. What does this mean? It means Ukraine can now use these weapons to hit targets in Russia. These targets are military places. Before, Ukraine could not easily hit military places in Russia, even if Russia was attacking from there. The German leader said this new rule helps Ukraine defend itself. It helps Ukraine stop attacks that come from inside Russia. Germany is an important country, but other important countries also agree with this change. The United States of America agrees. The United Kingdom agrees. France agrees too. Leaders from these countries talked together for many weeks. They came to an agreement. Germany's leader said that Germany's decision is the same as the decisions from the United States, the United Kingdom, and France. This shows that these countries are working together to help Ukraine. This change is very big. It means Ukraine can use strong missiles and other weapons with long range. Weapons like Storm Shadow missiles from the UK and France and ATACMS missiles from the USA can now reach places far inside Russia. There was also talk about Germany sending its Taurus missiles. These missiles can fly even further, maybe up to 500 kilometers. Ukraine's soldiers can now choose more targets to attack. They can hit military bases, places where soldiers gather, or places where Russia keeps its weapons or fuel inside Russia. This makes it harder for Russia to attack Ukraine from its own land. It gives Ukraine more ways to fight back and protect its cities and people. The leaders of Ukraine are happy about this news. They have asked for this change for a long time. They said it will help them fight better. It will help them stop the war. Many other countries that support Ukraine also think this is a good step, but some people are worried that this change could make the fighting worse. This news from May 26, 2025 is a big moment in the war. It changes how Ukraine can fight. It shows that Ukraine's friends want to help more. It is a big help for Ukraine to defend itself against attacks. It allows Ukraine to use powerful weapons against military targets far away. 2. The old rules. Before the big decision on May 26th, countries that helped Ukraine were very careful. They gave weapons but with rules. The main rule was that Ukraine could only use these weapons inside its own country. This was because helpers did not want the war to get bigger or more dangerous. They worried about hitting places inside Russia. But Russia often attacked Ukraine from its own land just across the border. Russian soldiers were safe there. Ukraine needed to stop these attacks. So Ukraine asked its helper countries to change the rules. Ukraine wanted to hit the Russian military places that were attacking them. Little by little, some of the rules started to change. It was a slow process. Helper countries talked a lot. They saw that Ukraine needed more ways to defend itself against attacks coming from Russia. An important step happened earlier. The United States, under President Donald Trump, who is the current president of the U.S. and it is real, changed a rule. The US allowed Ukraine to use some American missiles like ATACMS to hit certain targets in Russia near the border. This was a big change from the first rules. Other countries like the United Kingdom and France also started to allow Ukraine to use their long-range missiles, like Storm Shadow, against some targets in Russia. But there were still limits on how far the weapons could go inside Russia or what they could hit. Germany was also thinking about its rules. Germany had some very powerful missiles called Taurus. The government before was careful. They did not want to send these missiles if they could be used deep inside Russia without other countries agreeing. The new government wanted everyone to agree first. So, before May 26th, the old rules were getting weaker, but they were not completely gone. Ukraine had some freedom to hit targets in Russia, but only in certain places or with certain weapons. There were still different rules for different types of help. The final big change to remove almost all limits had not happened yet. This chapter shows how the rules were slowly changing over time, leading up to the big news. 3. New weapons for Ukraine. Now Ukraine is getting stronger weapons. These are types of missiles and rockets. They can travel very far. Before, these weapons could only hit targets inside Ukraine. This is changing. One type of missile is called Storm Shadow. France and the United Kingdom give these. Another is ATACMS. The United States gives these. These missiles can fly for about 250 to 300 kilometers. With the new rules, Ukraine can use them to hit military targets far inside Russia. This means places where the Russian army keeps supplies or soldiers. Germany might also send a missile called Taurus. This one can fly even farther, about 500 kilometers. If Ukraine gets Taurus missiles, they could hit important military places deep inside Russia. Think of places like large supply centers or train lines used by the army. Other rocket systems Ukraine has, like HIMARS, can also be used with more freedom now. Even their shorter-range rockets, which fly around 70 to 80 kilometers, can now target military sites just across the border in Russia. This change is important. Before, Russia could keep many military things safe just over the border and attack Ukraine. Now, Ukraine can reach those places. It gives Ukraine more ways to defend itself by attacking the enemy's power. Ukraine can now choose more military targets to attack than before. This makes the fight different on the ground. 4. Friends work together. Important people from different countries talked a lot. These were leaders from Germany, the United Kingdom, France, and the United States. They had many discussions about helping Ukraine. For a long time, they talked about the rules for weapons. Should Ukraine be able to use weapons to hit targets far away, maybe even inside Russia? This was a big question. The leaders needed to agree on an answer. The source text says these talks took weeks and months. It was a long process for the countries to think and decide together. Germany especially wanted to make sure all its friends agreed before changing its own rules. Germany's leader said his country's actions depended on what the United States, the UK, and France decided. Finally, the leaders from these 4 countries reached an agreement. They all said yes to the new plan. They agreed that Ukraine could use their donated weapons with more freedom. They agreed to lift the old rules about how far the weapons could go. This agreement was very important. It showed that these countries were united. When they work together and agree, they are stronger. It means they support Ukraine strongly together. The countries also decided something else. They said they would not tell Russia everything about the weapons they send to Ukraine. They will keep some information secret. This is to make it harder for Russia to know what Ukraine can do. Keeping some news quiet is part of their plan. The source text makes it clear that this decision was the result of many talks at a high level. It was not a fast decision. It was a slow process of friends working together, talking, and finally agreeing on a big change. This unity is a key part of helping Ukraine defend itself in a new way. 5. Good news for Ukraine. Ukraine felt very happy about the important news. Leaders in Ukraine said this change was a crucial step for their country's defense. President Zelensky spoke about how the new rule would help Ukraine protect itself much better from attacks coming from inside Russia. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense also thanked their friends in other countries for this big support. They said that Ukraine would use the new abilities carefully and smartly, only hitting military targets that are used to attack Ukraine. This change gave Ukraine more ways to fight back against the Russian army and protect its cities and people. It was a moment of great hope for Ukraine. Leaders from NATO countries and other friendly nations also showed strong support for the decision. NATO is a group of many countries working together for safety in Europe and North America. The head of NATO said he believed it was time for this change, and that Ukraine needed the freedom to use the weapons it received to defend itself fully. Leaders from important countries like the United States, the UK, and France said they fully agreed with Germany's announcement to lift the limits. Officials in London and Paris made it clear that they supported Ukraine using the weapons to hit back at military sites in Russia. This showed that these countries were united and standing together with Ukraine against the invasion. Their combined voice was strong. Many people in these countries also thought this was a good thing. In places like Germany, the United States, the UK, and France, many politicians and people agreed that Ukraine needed more help to defend itself from Russia's attacks. They felt that letting Ukraine hit military targets in Russia was the right thing to do to stop the attacks on Ukrainian land and save civilian lives. They believed it would make Russia's army weaker and make the war harder for Russia. This general support was important for the leaders making the decision, but some people felt worried about the news. They thought this decision could make the war more dangerous for everyone involved. They worried that it might lead to bigger problems or even a wider conflict between Russia and the Western countries. For example, some people in Germany, France, and other countries had concerns about what Russia might do in return for these new attacks. In the United States, an advisor to President Trump shared worries about the change. President Trump himself had spoken against sending many weapons to Ukraine in the past, saying it could make the war worse instead of helping find peace. These worried voices hoped for peace and were afraid of what might happen next because of this new step in the conflict. Overall, the news was seen as very positive for Ukraine's fight for freedom. It gave Ukraine new strength and hope to push back against the invasion and protect its future. It also showed strong and lasting support from many important friends around the world. This support is a big help for Ukraine in a difficult time. 6. Russia is not happy. The news about Ukraine getting new weapon rules reached Russia. Russia was not happy about this. They said this plan was very dangerous. Russia said that allowing Ukraine to use these weapons in this new way makes the war worse. They said it was a bad step. Leaders in Russia warned that they might do something strong in return for this change. They said there would be consequences. They did not say exactly what they would do, but their words sounded serious. Some other countries looked at the situation. Countries like China asked for peace talks. They wanted everyone to stop fighting and talk instead. They were worried about the war getting bigger. Right after the news came out, Russia acted quickly. They attacked Ukraine more. They sent more missiles and drones to Ukrainian cities. This showed that Russia was reacting to the new rules. Russia saw this as a very serious change. They said countries that helped Ukraine in this way were now more involved in the war. The government in Russia told its people that this was proof that the West was against Russia. They used the news to support their view of the war. They said the risk of a bigger conflict was growing because of these actions by other countries. Soldiers in Russia who were near the border area had to be more careful. They knew Ukraine might now target their positions. This meant Russia had to change some things about how they were fighting and protecting their military places near Ukraine. The world watched to see what would happen next. Russia's reaction was strong and fast. It was clear they did not accept the new rules for Ukraine's weapons. The situation became more difficult and tense very quickly. 7. What happens next? Now, Ukraine has a new ability to attack many more military targets inside Russia. These targets are very important for Russia's army. For example, Ukraine can use its longer-range weapons to hit places where soldiers are based far from the front lines. They can also target large stores of weapons, ammunition, and fuel. Places where the Russian military plans its actions, like command centers, are also now potential targets. This is a big change compared to before. Being able to attack these important military places inside Russia can make Russia's army less effective. When Ukraine hits supply depots or railway lines used for the military, it becomes harder for Russia to get the things its soldiers need at the front. This can slow down Russian attacks and make their army less strong on the front lines. By reaching these targets, Ukraine can better defend its own land and its people. This is a strategic advantage for Ukraine. Because Ukraine can now hit targets deeper inside Russia, Russia has to change how it operates. Russia must use more resources to protect its military sites and transport routes that were once safe. This might mean moving important supplies and equipment further away from the border. It also requires Russia to use more soldiers and air defense systems for defense, which could take them away from offensive actions in Ukraine. This decision by countries like Germany, the UK, France, and the USA to lift the limits on weapons shows their strong commitment to Ukraine's defense. It sends a clear signal that they are united and serious about helping Ukraine protect itself from Russian aggression. They are giving Ukraine the tools it needs to strike back at the source of attacks, showing belief in Ukraine's ability to use these weapons responsibly against military targets. However, this new situation also increases the risks in the war. Russia sees this as a big problem and has warned of strong reactions. There is a greater chance of dangerous events happening, perhaps due to a misunderstanding or a mistake. Experts worry that if one side feels cornered, they might take more extreme steps. This raises the possibility of the war getting bigger or becoming harder to control, making the situation more dangerous for everyone involved. This change is important for Ukraine's ability to defend itself and could affect the path of the war. It gives Ukraine more options to protect its cities and soldiers. But it also means the situation requires very careful management by all countries involved to try and avoid a bigger, more dangerous conflict in the future. The next period will be crucial. 8. A big change. On May 26, 2025, a very important decision was made. Countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany announced a big change. They said Ukraine can now use the long-range weapons they provide to hit military targets inside Russia. This changes the war in a major way for Ukraine. Before this new rule, Ukraine had limits. The weapons given by its friends could only be used against Russian forces and military places on Ukrainian land. This meant Russia could set up its military bases, stores of weapons, and command centers safely just across the border in Russia. From these safe places, Russia could launch attacks on Ukraine, knowing Ukraine could not hit them back with the most powerful Western missiles. But now, the situation is different. The lifting of these limits means Ukraine's army can target military sites anywhere within Russia. This includes the bases and supply lines close to the border and even further away. Russia can no longer attack Ukraine so easily from its own land without fear of being hit back directly. This forces Russia to think more carefully about where it places its military assets. This change also shows something important. The Western countries really trust Ukraine. Sending powerful, long-range missiles like Storm Shadow, Scalp, and ATACMS, and allowing them to be used inside another country needs a lot of trust. It means these countries trust Ukraine's military and government to choose targets carefully and only hit things important to Russia's war effort, not civilians. However, this decision also brings big risks. Russia's reaction was strong and angry. They called it a dangerous step. Russia has warned of possible strong responses. Many people are worried that hitting targets inside Russia could make the conflict much wider. There is a fear that it could lead to a bigger, more dangerous war that involves more countries. This is why being careful and talking about peace remains very important for everyone. For Ukraine, having the ability to hit targets inside Russia is a big help. It can damage Russia's ability to fight, maybe making their army weaker. It can help stop attacks that come from Russia. This might help Ukraine win the war and protect its people better. But as said, it's also a risk. The chance of Russia reacting badly and making the war worse is real. So this new rule is a balance between helping Ukraine defend itself powerfully and the danger of making the war much bigger and more difficult. It is a key moment that could change the direction of the conflict. What do you think will happen now in the war?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.